What started it all for me was that I suddenly realized that the Norwegian bank DNB sent a team of 25 women, no men, to an in-company program. And in my years as a CEO here and the president, that's the only time I have experienced an all-women in-company program.
When we first started this program, it was probably the most controversial market research IMD had ever done. But we still weren't sure whether we should have a program that's just for women. Everybody had an opinion, and the opinions were evenly split. Half the people thought this was the best thing IMD could ever do for women. Half the people thought it was the worst thing IMD could ever do for women. And the split was not along gender lines.
Some of the challenges that we found women had coming to the program were not necessarily being heard, that they don't necessarily negotiate for their position or a job, that they essentially are not strategic about developing a vision, and that sometimes they're also more willing to adjust their style to maybe a more masculine style in order to be heard at the table.
Peter Lorange, who was the president at the time, he kind of left it up to me. He said, "Martha, it's up to you."
There were very strong proponents of women in leadership positions. It was very much a matter of understanding that we needed non-linear thinking, i.e. a team of women and men. So for me, it was key that the program helped women leaders to think non-linear.
I'll never forget the first class, because we had about 35 participants in the first class, more women on campus at the same time than we'd ever had before.
About 50% of the women that were sent to the program were sent, which meant we call them typically prisoners. They don't necessarily want to be here in the first place. And the other 50% were already engaged at the beginning. And so those 50%, when they were converted, that was typically a moment I would remember.
At the same time, we had another program called something like Senior Leadership Dilemmas that was aimed at senior leaders, and it also had about 35 participants, and the two were in classrooms right next door to each other. And of course, our program, Strategies for Leadership, was all women. The other program, just by coincidence, was all men. And it was hilarious because we would have coffee break and everybody would be mixed, and then, we'd happen to go back after coffee break at the same time, and it was almost like there was a women's door and a men's door.
There is incredible expertise and experience in the SL alumni community. There's a think tank we call the WOW Women. WOW stands for Wise Outstanding Women, who brainstorm how more experienced members of the SL alumni community could mentor younger women and help them to navigate their careers. The SL alumni community is getting stronger and stronger. I'm absolutely convinced about it.
I got involved in the SL alumni retreat because, in fact, I created it. I did the program in 2010, and I saw that there was a real need for that community to get back together again. It's an interesting program in that at the end of 3.5 days, this very tight community is created.
Any minority in the workplace, when you're not the minority, you can kind of put aside that part of your identity and just be yourself. So one of the first things we noticed in the program was that the women were surprised at the diversity among themselves. And it was the first time they could recognize that they didn't have to put gender at the top of their identity.
These are very high-level professional women who come together and genuinely want to support each other, genuinely want to help, genuinely want to contribute. And I think there's a real magic in that. And yet organizations still face the fact that there may be employing 50% men and women at the beginning, at the entry phase of their organizations. And by the time they get to senior leadership, we're down to maybe 20% women.
There are still politics going on that shouldn't be underestimated. Maybe it's not being said openly, but you know, the position of men when essentially promoting a woman depends to me to a large degree on whether they actually have daughters themselves.
Days of, or should we say, over-rational management are gone. What's needed now is a bright thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, non-linear thinking, and that means sexes working together.
As the great Oscar Wilde said, be yourself because everyone else is taken. And it's this idea that if we want women leaders to really be powerful in their roles, how do we encourage them to be themselves? And how do we stand in our own shoes? How do we figure out actually what shoes suit us and own them? And whether they're high-heeled shoes or black shoes or, in my case, a wonderful pair of clown shoes.